Hi everyone, I'm Catherine, and today I'm going to be talking you through how I made my Halloween costume for 2019. In case you're not following me on Instagram, @CatherineMakes, you might not have seen my Halloween costume for this year. For this year, I was dressed as a legit snack, which is a reference to The Good Place, a very excellent television show in its final season on NBC. I highly recommend you watch that. If you do watch it, you probably remember this small reference from one of the scenes in season 3. However, I just fell in love with that scene. I'll link to it below in case you want to see it. There are mild spoilers in it, so if you haven't watched the show, don't watch the scene, just enjoy the making portion of this video. But what I really wanted to do for this Halloween costume was to pull in all of my favorite parts of Eleanor Shellstrop, played by Kristen Bell, and kind of make an inside joke of a costume. People who watched the show picked up on all of the little pieces to it, and people who didn't just thought it was kind of ridiculous that I was dressed up like a giant bag of chips. So to give you an overview of the costume, there's not actually a legit snack bag in the show. This is something that I invented in Sketch when I was thinking about how to turn legit snack into a costume that I could wear. So I did end up making it a bag of chips, and the specific type of chips is barbecue frosting. That's actually from the show. I have a screenshot that I'll insert so you can see that. So taking inspiration from that bag of chips, I added a window into my bag so that you can see the barbecue chips. And I also made giant shrimp so that it's a bag full of chips and shrimp. So Eleanor loves shrimp, and that just I thought it was really funny to make giant shrimp for this, and it was a lot of fun to make this. So I also have a lot of lettering on here, and I'll talk through how I made the lettering, how I made the shrimp and chips, and how I put it all together into this specific costume. So first up, when I had the idea to be a legit snack and I knew that I wanted it to be a bag of chips, I had to do a lot of sketching. So in order to sketch that, I was thinking through the size of that bag, what kind of lettering I would want, and then what to really do with that to make it more than just a giant box or square around me. And that's how I came up with the idea for the window that actually shows the snack pieces. I sourced the materials next to kind of get a feel for how that would look. And when I was doing that, I came across a few different fabrics that I really enjoyed. So first up is this beautiful shiny red fabric that's kind of a sateen, a super shiny silver fabric, and I knew that would be awesome for the inside of my bag of chips. And it really just makes it feel like one of those crinkly bags. And then I needed a clear window piece, so I just used some of the clear plastic that I have for painting, so drop cloths, in order to do that. I also used matte board for my structural piece. So underneath this bag, you might be able to see it because of the backlighting right now, but I have almost like a football player's shoulder pads to hold up the whole bag in that nice thickness. And then it also gives a nice flat plane for the lettering to rest on, so it looks really good. So I gathered all of those materials, and I also decided with those sculptural shrimp and chips that I wanted to sculpt those in a new process that I haven't done before. I used grow foam to actually create the shapes, to carve them out, and then I painted them with spray paint for that. So for that process, I started out by cutting cardboard pieces in the shape and the size that I wanted. I think this one, yeah, so this was a slightly larger shrimp, and I also had smaller shrimp cardboard pieces. When I started spraying the foam, one can of this lasted for about three 3 or 4 pieces before I had to start another can. And then I had to do the spray foam on both sides of this cardboard. So it would take 1 can for one side, another can for another side, and I had 3 shrimp and 3 chips. So, or 2, yeah, 3 and 3. So it was like probably 3 or 4 cans of this stuff. This is pretty inexpensive at Lowe's, very accessible. And I specifically got the window and door because it's a bit more solid. There's one other kind that is a little bit more flexible, and you can use that for other props, but for this one I wanted it to be pretty solid and hard. So this is what it looks like after you're done spraying it. There's the little nozzle on the grow foam that allows you to kind of put these lines. The first side, when I was kind of learning how to do it, I just sprayed it all over and ended up with this quite like bumpy side to it. On the second side, I got a little bit smarter with it, and I actually started putting lines, which made it much easier to carve later. So after this cured for, I just let it de-stink for 24 hours. I took it and I carved off that whole front surface. So that's what it looks like after you carve off the top layer of the foam. And this is a little bit more spongy, and you can see it's a bit more porous and does have holes and whatnot in it. I watched a lot of YouTube videos on how to work with this, and a lot of cosplayers who use this technique will then sand and fill and put a layer of plaster of Paris over this in order to make it smoother, and they've done amazing things. But since this was for a Halloween costume that I knew I'd probably wear once, unless NBC wants me to wear it to an event for their finale or whatever, I'm open to that. I decided that I didn't want to take that extra time to fill the shrimp. So when you look at the shrimp, you can see a lot of holes and you can see some of the rough edges from carving. But when it is inside of that pouch, all you see is that it's a giant shrimp. So I feel like it was quite successful. For the painting, sometimes spray paint will eat foam away and it will just disintegrate it. So I was using a technique where you off-gas it and just like lightly spray it on, and I didn't have too much of a problem with that happening with this foam. And for the barbecue chips, so this was that nice red fake flavor color. It's a little rougher around the edges and has, what's nice about this under the color of the foam is it's already kind of yellowish. So this allows some of that yellow to peek through, so it really looks more like a potato chip. So I made my potato chips and my shrimp first because that was the part I was most excited about. I wanted to see how the grow foam worked, and I also wanted to make sure, like, that was a big point of failure because if I couldn't make those pieces, I didn't think that the costume would be as fun and as fulfilling. So I made those first and I was really happy with them, and then I was ready to dig into making the rest of the bag and the pieces that went on the bag and all those details. For the bag, I had to do a little bit of math and drafting, and you can see this on some of the sketches that I've done showing how I was measuring it, what the sizes were, how I was going to sew the pieces together so that I had the correct way for the fringe to fall. And then I also had to figure out how to make the plastic pouch for the shrimp and chips to fit into. And you can see my very first prototype of my bag costume. I knew that I wanted this fringe above my neck, and I wanted fringe on the bottom portions, and then that hole cut in. And then starting to think through how the bag that holds the shrimp would expand to hold those things while still being sewn into the bag itself. So the best way that I know to figure out these kinds of mechanics and pieces is to steal pieces from other areas. So what I did was I took a paper grocery bag, one of those brown paper grocery bags that folds at the bottom, and I knew that I wanted that mechanism to open up and hold those pieces. So I actually took one and cut it up. Actually, I took two, so it was wide enough. And I took that piece, I slotted the two bags into each other, and then put it up against my my sheath that I had already sewn to make sure it was the right size. And then I cut this flat so that I could trace it and actually use this as my pattern for both the clear plastic and for the metal shiny backing. And you'll see on here that I have the +4, +1. That was to create some seam allowances so that when I sew it together, it would actually be this size when it was done. And then the +4 was just because this wasn't quite tall enough to fit. So that was my reminder to make it that size. And then this piece was for the silver that goes in the back of the clear plastic. And that allowed me to leverage something that already works and use it for my purposes and actually show that folding. And it works pretty well. Here's a closer look for the clear bag that I sewed. This was with the painter's drop cloth. And then you can see the construction on the inside. So this is the same structure in the grocery bag. And then I did half of the bottom with the silver, half with the clear, and then the backing is that silver. So from the front, you can see the silver in the back, and then it opens up so it can hold all of the goodies inside of it. If it didn't have this bottom portion here, all of these would be kind of squished. And then I also had to make a little harness to hold up the back of the bag. The back of the bag is held up with these two pieces that go around the neck so that this portion is held up in the back. The front portion is held up by this front of the bag. And yes, this is glued in place just because it was a little too difficult to sew. I'm not the strongest sewer, but that worked well enough. And then the shrimp and the chips were quite visible from this part. So the details for the bag itself, I drew up in Illustrator, and I always like to prototype these pieces as I go so I don't waste material and laser cutter time. So I drew up my lettering in Illustrator and I printed it first, and that gave me a good feel for if it was the right size for that chest piece. Then after I checked that, I laser cut the letters out of felt. So this is the legit snack portion is 3 layers of felt. There's a white piece behind. There are black letters, and then there's yellow letters on top of that. And that is directly related to the design of the chip bag in the show that I was referencing. And it just gives it that nice pop. It looks very professional, I feel like. So I really enjoyed that. Now the key to getting that to look correct and get the spacing was to cut templates. So after I laser cut my felt, I also laser cut butcher paper with the lettering on it. So for this, I put this template on top of the white piece of felt, and then I used spray adhesive on all of the letters, and then I put the letters into the slots exactly. And that's how that looks so perfect. It's because it was lined up exactly with computer specificity. So I also did that with all of my small lettering. Originally, my Now With More Shrimp was going to be in the corner, but you can see how that moved over. So originally it was going to be diagonal, but I just made it straight underneath my barbecue frosting. I have my barbecue frosting, my Made in Arizona, which, funny story, the Z in Arizona is backwards. I actually accidentally sprayed the glue on the wrong side, and I was going to laser cut a new one, and I realized that it actually is much more appropriate to just put it backwards because the whole point in the show is that they're making fun of Arizona with Eleanor Shellstrop. So sorry, Arizona watchers, but that was part of it. And then you can see for the back, on the back I have a testimonial from Eleanor Shellstrop herself, and I created the template for that. So I have, I had this template so I could put the quote in the bubble at the proper spacing. And then I had this template so that I put the bubble in the right place in relation to the quote. So all of that was cut out of one piece of butcher paper, but it's actually two different templates that I used in order to glue all of these pieces together. And the spray adhesive was quite easy to work with as long as you just did really light sprays and then flipped over the pieces in order to glue them in place. So that was the main process pieces for my Halloween costume this year. The spray foam was so fun to try out for the first time, and I really enjoyed making the shrimp and chips. I felt pretty happy with how the sewing went. Also, using foam in this top fringe so it stood up. I thought that looked really great, and it worked quite well throughout the day when I wore this to work. And yes, I did actually wear this to work for the entire day for Halloween, and it held up really well. I'm also really proud with how this inner pocket turned out and how professional the lettering looks by using my laser cutter and using templates in order to space it appropriately. So let me know what you think. I got a lot of love for this costume on Twitter and Instagram. It did get reshared on NBC's Instagram account for The Good Place. And I even had some of the actors like it, comment on it, and retweet it. And I'm just really happy to share my love for this show. What the showrunners and writers and actors have created with The Good Place is phenomenal, and I'm just happy to be able to make something that shows how much I love that show. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe. I'll be doing more laser cutting projects soon, and let me know what else you'd like to see on this channel. Thanks.